Now we'll step away from gameplay mechanics and turn our attention to meaning. We'll first look at cooperative problem solving. Players run into bottlenecks in the level design that they need to overcome with simple problem-solving skills. These sequences have drawn criticism for being repetitive and overly simple, and the criticism stands if we're judging these segments on their brain-busting variety. However, I'd like to show how these serve narrating rather than puzzling ends. The Last of Us sacrifices the variety we might expect from adventure game puzzles, and it instead establishes a stable, interactive vocabulary. Puzzles have definite solutions. They're not open-ended like combat. They guide the player through scripted behaviors so that the player performs Joel's character. This is distinct from conforming Joel's choices to the player's combat style. Through these means, the game trains the player into understanding how cooperative actions communicate trust relationships between characters. It elaborates upon these foundations through escalation and remixing, and it has the player participate in Joel's and Ellie's relationships. Let's start by looking at how the game establishes that foundation through Joel's relationship with Tess. We learn through the story that Joel and Tess have a close bond.
So, you didn't answer my question about Tess. I thought the two of you were inseparable.
Beyond that, Tess is our tutorial guide. Joel's relationship with Tess reflects the player's relationship with the game at this point. The game might jilt expectations down the line, but we must trust its communication at first in order to learn how to interact with its world. That bond between player and tutorial is transferred to the bond between Joel and Tess. So we start with the assumption of absolute trust in Tess. From there, we understand that cooperative actions stem from and express that trust relationship. Let's look at these core actions then. We work with Tess to move heavy furniture and open doors.
Joel, give me a hand with this.
We overcome heights that require a boost.
You ready?
Yes, ma'am.
Come on.
We get through areas with lids too heavy for one person to handle alone.
Be careful.
What am I?
And we move planks to cross gaps. These actions serve as our basic vocabulary for trust relationships. We previously were trained in technique, but now we've received player training in significance and meaning.
It's a bit heavy.
I think I can handle it.
We're learning how to perform these actions, yes, and we're also learning how to participate in Joel's relationships with other characters.
Get your ass up here. Let's move.
We get to compare Joel's relationship with Tess when he develops a relationship with someone that he does not trust, Ellie.
I ain't buying it.
We go back through familiar routines of shared problem solving, but Joel interacts exclusively with Tess. While this changes later, it's significant that he does not boost Ellie here.
Come on, Ellie.
All right, kid, you're up.
Come on.
Joel's later over-explanation of how to cross a plank reinforces the point.
Now watch your step as you're going up, because it's going to be a little...
Here we encounter escalation. We started by trusting Tess, and now Joel has to build trust with Ellie. Of course, his distrust is clear from the narrative alone.
You don't bring up Tess. Ever. Matter of fact, we just keep our histories to ourselves. Secondly, don't tell anybody about your condition. They think you're crazy, they'll try to kill you. And lastly, you do what I say when I say it. We clear?
Sure.
Repeat it.
What you say goes.
Good.
Joel refuses to let her help in combat, despite any prior experience.
Let me use that. I'm a pretty good shot with that thing.
How about we just leave this kind of stuff to me?
Well, we could both be armed. cover each other.
I don't think so.
And Joel consistently refuses her a gun.
What? I need a gun.
No, you don't.
Joel, I can handle myself.
No. Just stay here.
Moving into the pattern of escalation we've looked at elsewhere, his distrust results in his single-handedly solving problems that he and Tess handled together before. In particular, Joel deals with the problem of boards and gaps by himself, whereas he trusted Tess to help him with those very obstacles before. We might justify this by saying that Ellie is weaker than Tess, but later evidence suggests that this isn't a problem. In Pittsburgh, for example, she is perfectly capable of maneuvering a plank without assistance.
All right. Now you just need to find a way up.
So the problem is not Ellie's lack of ability. The problem is Joel's distrust. The game gives us a stable set of interactions that represent Joel's trust relationship with Tess, then it forces us to handle them solo to reinforce Joel's comparative distrust of Ellie. As time passes, of course, Joel overcomes this emotional hurdle and begins to trust Ellie more. The game lays the foundation for their growing interdependence with the swimming and palette sequences. The first of these fits nicely at the end of their escape from Boston, functionally the beginning of their relationship. Each sequence like this involves Joel serving Ellie, and Ellie serving Joel in turn. It takes a while for this dynamic to appear in other scenarios, though. When Joel finally does trust Ellie, though, the game taps into that interactive vocabulary that we looked at before. We understand boosting as a unit of meaning, as an act that communicates trust. The Last of Us communicates the changes in Joel's and Ellie's relationship when it transitions from solo to cooperative problem-solving. The game remixes this when it has us build a group relationship between Joel, Bill, and Ellie. To put it lightly, they're a fractured bunch.
Hey, what are you... Joel?
Bill!
What are you doing?
Bill! All right, get on your knees! Don't test me!
I see so much as a threat.
Ow! Stop! Son of a...
You listen to me, you little shit.
No, fuck you! You handcuffed
I
him!
need you to shut up.
To reach cohesion, we build off Joel's separately established relationships with Ellie and Bill. Joel either cooperates with Ellie alone, as here with the dog door, and here with the ladder. Or Joel cooperates with Bill alone, as here with the garage door, and here with the door to the gym. After the fight against the bloater, the group reaches a tenuous unity. We return to a familiar unit of meaning. Joel boosts Bill up, and, remarkably, Bill assists Ellie independent of Joel. The act is interrupted, however, and Joel is left to fight infected on his own. Yet he's not abandoned. Group cohesion is sustained, and Bill helps Joel up so the group can continue. The three reach the height of group cohesion at the end of Bill's town. All of them work together to start the truck. Bill and Joel push while Ellie pops the clutch to turn over the engine. The group has gone from complete disarray to full unity, and we perform the growing trust relationships through these shared problem-solving sequences. The Last of Us uses cooperative problem-solving to communicate ups and downs in Joel's relationship with Henry as well. We cooperate with him in stealth combat, of course, as we did with Tess. We also get familiar co-op cues, such as opening a heavy door to represent trust. Nonetheless, the game uses its own established interactive vocabulary to undermine our expectations of trust. In Bill's town, we saw the game use boosting as a unit of meaning, and we saw that the action was interrupted but not cancelled. Henry's episode takes this one step further. Here, the action is interrupted and then cancelled. It's significant that The Last of Us chooses this situation for Henry's betrayal. In the terms of the game's interactive vocabulary, Henry has broken faith during an event that foundationally expresses trust.
I'm sorry. We're leaving.
What? What's this bullshit?
Hey, now!
What the
By contrast, the trust relationship built so far with Ellie is immediately affirmed against Henry's broken faith. Ellie jumps down, and the game reinforces her loyalty by immediately giving us another cooperative action. We're participating in a tense action sequence, yes, but, more importantly, we're participating in the dynamics of these characters' relationships with Joel. Joel, of course, is not happy with Henry.
Henry! Get back, son! Hey.
However, he lets his anger go when he finds out that Henry saved Ellie as well as him.
He saved me too. We would have drowned.
After this, each pair discusses how well they can trust the others. After exploring the riverside separately, though, they converge, and their mending relationship is expressed by another problem-solving sequence, again echoing a fundamental unit of meaning. Joel and Henry hold open a barrier too heavy for one person to handle alone. We saw this before during our tutorial with Tess. Back in Billstown, we built a group dynamic with Joel, Bill, and Ellie that dissolved by Bill's choice. We go back through these motions with Sam and Henry. Once more, we are constructing a group dynamic, and the game expresses this by involving everyone in shared problem-solving during the remainder of the sewer segment. In the most elaborate sequence, Joel removes underwater debris, Henry opens a floodgate, Joel ushers Ellie across water, and Ellie brings the three of them across on industrial machinery. In this section, the trust relationship that the game builds and expresses through these shared interactions peaks when Joel and Henry must finally trust each other with their respective charges.
So, this is awkward.
After they're separated, The Last of Us uses cooperative problem-solving to develop Sam's ability to contribute to group cohesion. This sequence alone indicates that a base level of group trust has developed, as Joel immediately engages in a shared action with Sam that he took nearly an entire chapter to build up to with Ellie alone. Sam's confidence appears to increase through this shared event. The Last of Us communicates Sam's development by undermining the success of a shared door-opening event between Joel and Henry. Sam bucks Henry's overprotection through the same action that Ellie undertook when she started to gain Joel's trust. As Ellie went to the other side of a barricade to remove a pipe from a latch, so Sam does the same. Uniquely through these means, the group has bonded. So let's summarize. Tess is our founding tutorial relationship, and we learn a basic vocabulary of trust exercises through Joel's time with her. These elements then escalate as we learn what distrust looks like. Joel refuses help from Ellie that he previously had received from Tess. These elements then remix in Billstown as Joel, Bill, and Ellie move from a state of distrust to group cohesion. This remixes once more as we pair up with Henry and Sam. We learn how established trust is broken by violating these foundational exercises. We watch the relationship repair, and we watch the group bond uniquely through these sequences. In each instance, we watch the same basic trust exercises become more complex as the game becomes more expressive. If we did not have this stable set of cooperative interactions, we would not have a consistent design language to correlate these events that look like puzzles, but that instead appear to serve narrative ends. This structure reinforces and facilitates the story. The big payoff comes when Joel and Ellie enter Salt Lake City. Joel's willingness to engage in trust exercises indicates that their relationship has attained a level of complete interdependence. However, there are bumps in the execution of these trust exercises. When these bumps happen during a set of sequences that express an emotional aspect of the game's story, The Last of Us emphasizes the fragility of Joel's and Ellie's relationship. As expressions of the game's emotional side, these final cooperative sequences convey separation anxiety and disappointment. First, Ellie's distraction results in her neglecting her responsibilities toward Joel. This expresses some of the distance that already exists in their relationship after Ellie's encounter with David. It also indicates that Ellie will not always be there, a risk that Joel confronts directly after being captured by the Fireflies. Problems with the second trust exercise come not from either character but from the context. Joel boosts Ellie immediately after moving through the game's final onslaught of infected. On harder difficulties, killing all the clickers and bloaters is simply not possible given limited supplies. Joel and Ellie have to draw them out and sneak past. Only then will the triangle prompt activate. The trust exercise occurs under anxious duress. For the third cooperative action, Joel swims under a wrecked semi to retrieve a ladder for Ellie. We already understand that this is an anxious scenario for Ellie. She says as much during other segments when Joel has to swim out of sight. Importantly, while these cooperative sequences are essentially expressions of anxiety, they still succeed. They express the closeness of Joel's and Ellie's relationship, that they'll come through for each other no matter what. The fourth cooperative action revisits Joel's first step in trusting Ellie. Joel boosts her over a fence so that she can remove an obstacle barring the door. When they've done this in the past, Joel has warned Ellie to be careful. This is the one time that his warning proves necessary. In a sense, the anxiety here foreshadows what's about to happen when they find the fireflies. Joel is about to deliver her into a threatening situation from which she must be saved. The fifth cooperative action revisits the pallet event, our first interaction unique to Joel and Ellie. Now we should distinguish between types of separation here. Joel departs from Ellie to retrieve the pallet, and this is not significant in itself given that he's left her alone under similar circumstances before. What's important, though, is that the action is interrupted.
Damn ladder broke off the wall.
The unexpectedness of this interruption turns a deliberate separation into separation anxiety. Ellie's distant from Joel, and Joel has to cover that distance, forecasting what he's about to do in the Firefly facility. The obstacles and mistakes embedded in these problem-solving sequences suggest the upcoming breach in Joel's and Ellie's trust relationship.
They've stopped looking for a cure.
The final shared actions see this change through. We encounter the final cooperative problem-solving events when Joel and Ellie approach Tommy's village. Joel and Ellie help each other through this barbed wire fence, suggesting that their trust relationship remains intact. But it isn't as secure as it used to be. Their final shared action dramatizes this breach. Joel and Ellie encounter a ledge that they would normally handle with a boost. Rather than boost Ellie, though, Joel puts himself first. This last action puts the player in Ellie's situation. Ellie herself, of course, is only dimly aware of the events that have led up to the present moment. Nonetheless, we enact her changed relationship with Joel. In her life, as in this cooperative action, Joel has made the consequential choice, and Ellie has no other option but to go along. In conclusion, The Last of Us asks us to revise our assumptions about what puzzles mean in a video game. Through external actions, we perform the interior world of these characters' relationships. By teaching us to associate meaning with specific interactions, it trades brain-busting problem-solving for low-challenge, repeated puzzles that narrate the character relationships through interactivity, making full use of what's unique about the medium for telling a fixed story.